I'm Father Joe Chamblin, and the topic of this presentation is Prayer to the Saints. Where did it come from? How did it develop? And what does it mean today? First of all, where does it come from? Well, it comes from something that we've probably affirmed many different times in our life. Towards the end of the Apostles' Creed, we declare, I believe in the communion of saints. What exactly is the communion of saints? Well, the communion of saints is a network of friendships that connect us to the love of God. The communion of saints includes those of us on earth, God's adopted children through baptism. It includes the saints in heaven, and it includes those who may be experiencing purification after death, whom we traditionally call the souls in purgatory. The important point here is that the lines of communication remain open among all the members of the communion of saints, in whatever sphere of existence they are presently living. So praying to the saints in heaven and having the saints in heaven look after us makes perfect sense if we understand what lies behind our belief in the communion of saints. Technically speaking, anyone who is baptized could be called a saint, and St. Paul used that term sometimes to talk about the members of the faith communities that he had founded. But for our purposes, we will just be talking about our connection with the saints in heaven. In the letter to the Hebrews, the author describes in vivid detail the trials and tribulations and the heroic actions by many holy people from the past. Then he says, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us rid ourselves of every burden and sin that clings to us and persevere in running the race that lies before us. So the picture we get is a track meet with the saints in the stands cheering us on to the finish line so that we can join them in the heavenly kingdom. This passage suggests that we can look to the saints for both inspiration and support. They model for us the path to heaven, and they remind us that we can endure many hardships if we keep our goal in mind, and they support us on our journey. Sports teams often talk about the home field advantage. It often helps to have your fans cheering for you. People who have run the Chicago Marathon have said how much energy they got from the spectators applauding them along the marathon route, especially if they're getting really, really tired toward the end. Runners feed off the energy of the cheering crowds. But true devotion to a saint means that we're not only asking for their help and drawing on their support, we're also trying to imitate the faith and the holiness of their life. That is the point that the letter to the Hebrews is making. We have to let go of the things in our life that are holding us back from becoming saints, from reaching the finish line. A marathon runner cannot just wake up in the morning of the marathon and decide, well, I'm going to run 26 miles today. If we don't train, we won't make it to the finish line, no matter how many people are cheering for us along the way. We have to practice self-discipline. And the same is true of making it to heaven. To put it in modern terms, saints become a kind of life coach. The first saints to be honored by the church were martyrs, those who gave up their life for Christ. In the 4th century, when physical martyrdom became less common, the door was open to what we were called spiritual martyrs. They lived a life focused on the love of God and neighbor, and not the values of the world. It was during this time that devotion to Mary began to flower. Though she herself did not suffer martyrdom, she suffered much in seeing her son martyred. Prayer to the saints took a more formal turn during the late Middle Ages, what is commonly called the Age of Feudalism. If you remember from your 6th grade history, you know that those at the lower level of feudal society pledged their loyalty to those at a higher level. Knights pledged their loyalty to the lord of the manor, and they in turn protected the peasants. Later on, as the arts began to flourish, artists and authors and composers had patrons to support their work. Advocates, intercessors, go-betweens, and patrons were essential to the functioning of society. And that had a powerful influence on the spiritual universe as well. One didn't approach the lord of the manor directly, one used a patron or intercessor. Likewise, one did not approach God directly, one used a patron saint. Certain saints, because of their life story or their name, came to be identified with certain professions or locations or causes. Some of these associations are easy to identify. St. Lucy is the patron saint of those with fading eyesight, because the name Lucy in Latin is Lucia, which means light. St. Peregrine is the patron saint of those living with cancer, because he himself was healed of a cancerous growth through prayer. St. Anthony, now known as the finder of lost things, was originally known as a preacher renowned for finding lost souls. And speaking of souls, why is St. Peter the patron saint of those with foot trouble? Well, because on Easter morning, when racing to the empty tomb, Peter could not run as fast as the other disciple. Hence, the implication was that St. Peter had foot trouble. In our churches, the saints were normally placed on pedestals, and this helped reinforce the position they occupied in the spiritual universe. They stood between God and us. They brought our petitions before God. This is the way that many of us were taught about the saints. We don't worship saints or statues, but we ask the saints to pray for us. During the centuries when the Mass was in Latin, we could pray our devotional prayers to the saints in our own language. And so the saints help make prayer accessible to all of us, especially if we were kneeling before a statue of our favorite saint. We had a real physical connection with our favorite saint, and we could talk to him or her as a heavenly friend. In modern times, as the image of God has become less austere and less remote, people rightly ask, why do I need to pray to the saints? Why do I need a go-between? Why can't I just pray directly to God? And they're right, of course. We don't need to pray to the saints. We can go directly to God. We don't have to have an intercessor. That is why the ancient image from the book of Hebrews about the saints as part of a cheering crowd might make more sense to contemporary Catholics than the medieval notion of patrons and intercessors. The saints are not so much praying for us as praying with us. They are on our side, encouraging us. They are standing with us, not above us. They offer us hope. They remind us that in spite of the many obstacles we face, and which many of them faced, it is possible to make it to the finish line and enter the heavenly realm. While prayer to the saints is not nearly as common today among Catholics as in decades past, I'm sure that prayer to the saints will endure, because the saints are our friends, and we all need friends, especially friends in high places. We need such friends who can inspire us, who can encourage us, and whose life story we can identify with. The saints help us become the person God created us to be. There are many formula prayers to the various saints, many of them found in leaflets or on the back of holy cards. But we don't have to follow a set formula when praying to the saints. Prayer, especially when we are under great stress, can come straight from the heart and in our own words, as if we were talking to one of our friends. Do you have a favorite saint? How does his or her life story connect with your story?